price for the provision of water, and that's a nonsense. But somebody is going to have to pay for it. This year we're going to borrow €5 billion, but we cannot continue to borrow money to fund the basic, most necessitous services in the state. And people need to stand up and do communication. I don't blame the people who went out to the streets, because when the vacuum was left there and people got angry and got mad, and rightly and justifiably so, in the absence of so much of information, that we as a political leaders and as the people at the head of Irish Water had a moral obligation to communicate to people and to citizens. And we failed miserably, and that's why we got where we got. And unfortunately, if you look what's happening in the event of those protests that happened, the political system needs to man up and recognise what's happening in our society. There is a steep divide coming and emerging among the people between left and right. And the political system is belatedly and delayed behind the scenes, not catching up and not getting out there fast enough to recognise what the people want. The people want to know, where do we stand and on whose side do we stand? And the day is gone of the politician who's going to be the catch-all, middle of the ground, stay safe, sit on the fence. That is driving people crazy. There's a stark left, there's a stark right, and people want to know where you stand, who you represent, and who you're fighting for. And I will end, Count Corlin, asking the question. 100 million was found in the last week, or couple of weeks, to satisfy that protest, which I believe was not as a result, even though the charges were higher, but was not as a result, but was as a result primarily of a lack of communication and a fabrication of untruths that went out there. But I would prefer personally to see that 100 million, and the people I represent, the hard-pressed taxpayers who are struggling with massive USC and massive taxation charges, I would prefer to have seen it gone into the Fair Deal scheme and to eliminate the waiting lists that are there for nursing homes, which is ultimately costing the taxpayer a fortune for every individual.
We're very tight for time.
Who's in the hospital.
Thank you, Corlin. I'm happy to add my name to the number of deputies and ministers who have already welcomed the announcements made by Minister Kelly yesterday. It has, of course, been extremely frustrating the past few months. It's been frustrating not just for the people that I represent, whether or not they agree with water charges, but for me as a TD, for many of my colleagues. If you look back at the last year or so, this government has lifted this country out of the ashes. We've actually brought it back to life. I don't care what anybody says. And we are beginning to see a recovery. And the only way a country can recover is by getting people back to work, by bringing money back into the system. As a government, we've created 70,000 new and sustainable jobs since coming into power. We will have created 100,000 by the end of this term if we remain, which I'm sure we will. And this year we saw the most positive budget in 6 years, and yet for the past 2 months we have been talking about water, and it is extremely frustrating for people. So I welcome the announcements yesterday by Minister Kelly. I welcome the clarifications around how much we're going to pay, when people will have to pay, how Irish Water is going to operate, where their money is going to go, how people can actually lower their bills, so how they can save money by conserving. The issue of PPS numbers is gone. The entire issue of privatisation, which, might I add, it's the opposition who are talking about it, so unless they have some plans in the background, it's certainly not on Fine Gael or Labour's agenda, and I think we need to move on from that. I have spoken to many people about this in the past few months. The majority of those are willing to pay, but of course they want to see that it is a fair system, they want to see that it is affordable, and they want to see return for their investment, so where their money is going is actually working. They want to see the leaks fixed, people who are on boiled water notices that they're taken off them, and where raw sewage is actually going into our rivers, that is fixed. But in order to do that, we need money and we need to invest. So I would ask Sinn Féin, I would ask the Socialists, the Independents and Fianna Fáil, who actually signed us up for the domestic water charges, and who would have introduced them by now and actually charged a lot more, where is this money going to come from? Because they're talking about progressive tax systems. We already have one in Ireland here. We're spending over $1 billion a year on a system that doesn't work, and I'm sure, Ken Cole, you're blue in the face listening to us talk about the figures and the facts, but 40% of our water is literally going down the drain, and we can't continue that way. We're throwing money away, and unless we invest in it now, it's going to cost us more in the long run. And I'll use Minister Noonan's example as an analogy. If I were to fill my car up with diesel tonight and drive home, and there were a hole in that tank, and I let it sit all night, and when I wake up, 40% of it has just leaked away, I'm not going to get into my car and drive around and go about my business and fill it up again and lose a fortune. I'm going to fix it, and that's what we need to do, and we need to be realistic about it. Now, I understand that people have been feeling worried and that there's a lack of information, and there's been a bit of a pause in the last while, and that is our fault. But when there's a lack of information, there is a vacuum, and in a vacuum it tends to get filled up with hot air and misinformation. But to be clear, for a single adult household households, charges will be capped at €160. For any other households, it will be capped at €260. If you take away the conservation grant of €100, we're looking at €60 and €160 respectively. Break that down even further, and it amounts to between €1 and €3 a week. Now, if I were to go out and buy a bottle of water, I wouldn't get very much change out of €3 because it is not cheap. Water is not cheap. It's not cheap to produce. Yes, Ireland will have the cheapest rates in all of the continent. France is €603, Spain 340, Germany 792, our neighbours in the UK 646. So we are trying to make this as affordable as possible for people. I do think that everybody has the right to have their voice heard. People have made their voice clear in the last while through protests, through peaceful protests, and as public representatives we have to listen, and we must listen, and I think we have listened. We've made a lot of mistakes and we're owning up to that, and we've put our hands up and we're trying to fix it, but I don't think we should be bullied either. And what I saw last week in Jobestown and what happened on Monday night in Sligo was absolutely disgraceful for a Taoiseach of this country, a person who was democratically elected by the people of Ireland, to be treated in that manner, to walk through a crowd that was clearly hostile and have a water balloon thrown at her. I don't care who you are, I'm sure she must have been terrified because nobody knows what's been thrown at them. And I would say to any TD who was there, who was encouraging that, they should take a long, hard look at why they got into politics, because if they're going to treat people like that, then maybe they need to rethink things. So, Ken Corla, I'll just finish on one thing. The opposition wants jobs, they want everything faster and quicker. If we look at the likes of Intel, a company that brings so much employment to this country, a fact was given to me there recently, Intel uses as much water in one day as the entire city of Kilkenny. Well, if we want to attract business and get people back working, then we need to fix our infrastructure in order for those companies to actually come to Ireland. Thank you.
The Deputy Peter Fitzpatrick.
Ken Corla, as a government we have made some very difficult and unpopular decisions over the last 3 years. But we've also realised that our constituents, the people who put us in government, are the people who have made the biggest sacrifices. They've helped us turn the country finances around, overseen the removal of the troika, lowered the unemployment rate, and we are now in a position where our growth figures are the envy of Europe. When we entered the government 3 years ago, this country was broke and borrowing €22 billion a year. This year we'll be borrowing €5 billion, a reduction of €17 billion, or nearly 80%. When I decided to enter politics and represent Fine Gael at the last election, I did so for a number of reasons. I believed that Fine Gael could save the country from financial ruins. I wanted to make a difference for my local constituency. I stand here today and I am proud to say that this government, along with people who put us in government, has brought this great country of ours back to the brink of financial ruins and despair, and that I, along with other party members, are making a difference in a local constituency. I genuinely believe that the Irish people never wanted to go back to the boom and bust cycles of the previous government, and indeed the boom and bust policies of our opponents who deal in fantasy economics, where they expect to pay for nothing and have the government pay for everything. This is simply unrealistic and demonstrates their populist policies and the fact that they will say or promise anything just to get into power. Now I am the first to admit that we have made mistakes in government, but we have listened to the people and do understand the pressure they are under. As I already said, it is the people's sacrifices that is allowing economic recovery to happen. With respect to the water charges, we have made the charges both affordable and simple. People now have the clarity and certainty they deserve. After the water conservation grant, water charges will be capped annually at €60 for single adult households and €160 for other households. That is just €1 and €3 per week. These charges are the cheapest in Europe. These statistics highlight the affordability of water charges in Ireland and the commitment of this government to ensure that water charges introduced will be credible and fair. As I already stated, I welcome the fact that the affordability will underpin all future government policies in relation to water charges, and Cabinet will legislate to ensure they remain the case after 2019. We have listened to the people on this, and the ministers and the future ministers will have the power to set caps that are acceptable to the people. It must not be forgotten that our water system is broken and is in urgent need of investment. We have situations where 21,000 people in Roscommon have been on boiling notice over 6 or 7 years. The Greater Dublin area is in a crucial situation with regards to its water supply. Over 41% of all water treated is lost through leaks in the system. And national water utility is the only realistic way to facilitate the improvement of our water system, and that is so badly needed. Water is a precious resource, and we must do everything in our power to protect this future generation. The focus on water conservation has to continue. Irish water investment programmes will stop the leaks. ensure everybody has good, clean water, and that the country has the water infrastructure it needs to secure investment and the growth economy. In Loud, investment will be made in Cooley Regional Water Supply Scheme, and further investment is planned for Drogheda and RD water supply schemes, as well as RD and the Dundalk Stewart schemes and the Dundalk and Drogheda wastewater treatment plants. Conservation is vital, and meeting is key to this. Meters mean that people can beat the cap and even pay less for their water through conservation. With the measures introduced, meters will reduce bills and will be essential to detecting and fixing leaks. I am delighted that we can confirm that Irish Water is and will always remain in public-owned utility. This will be cemented in legislation by requiring any change put to the people in the premises. But simply this will mean that there is no privatisation without the consent of the Irish people. Other matters which are causing genuine concern to my constituents have been dealt with also. Irish Water will not require PPS numbers, and those PPS numbers already submitted will be destroyed. I also welcome the fact that the previous announced bonuses will not be paid. I would now urge those on the other side of the House to stop the scaremongering and present the real facts to the constituents. To finish, I would like to say that after years of underinvestment and neglect, the Irish Water Scheme will be finally fit for purpose and ensure that not only citizens and industries but future generations will have a safe and reliable water source. I believe that history will show that the very difficult decisions and this government has made and the sacrifices that our people has made will be seen as instrumental in securing the vital natural resources. Go Margaret.
Now call on Deputy Tom Fleming, sharing his time with Deputy Matthew McGrath and Peter Matthews.
When legislation for setting up Irish Water came before this House, I spoke opposing it due to the fact that I felt appropriate funding should initially be expended on upgrading the existing infrastructure and give sufficient allocations to the local authorities to remedy the deficient public water and wastewater systems for a number of years, and perhaps after maybe 5 years transition stage to progressing on to developing the national board. In the meantime, there also could be a national campaign for water conservation and to eliminate wastage with an emphasis on getting this message across through our school systems, for instance, and at local community level. Also, there could be a grant incentive measure for installation of water harvesting systems for domestic use and for businesses. Unfortunately, we have learned the hard way, and the mistakes that have been made in setting up the new state company are not reversible at this stage and only partially fixable, as we'll say, has been explained to us here in yesterday's statements. 12 months ago, the government rammed through a bill that they deliberated on for over perhaps a year and a half or 2 years, and recklessly committed itself to tens of millions of euro in expenditure. And over the past month, the government were biding for time to make further changes and to get clarity on what these decisions means. Communications or lack of communications we were told were the main factors in the debacle, but mistakes were not solely about the lack of communications. There were several destructive errors made, spending millions on consultants, hiring staff on a bonus system, which it seems is legally impossible to reverse. Another mistake was starting with a model of recovery of full costs from charges instead of focusing on affordability, at least for a few years anyway. Also, proposing high charges without a study of proper usage and complicating the entire fee structure and frightening the general public with exorbitant price proposals. And they were also appearing to penalise families with children over 16 who were at home, and the fiasco of seeking PPS numbers and all these other measures were a huge turn-off to a cash-strapped public who were reeling with an avalanche of austerity of measures over recent years. I do hope we won't have any more squandering of very valuable public funding and public monies, and there is a need to focus on repairing and upgrading the infrastructure and prioritising and expending finances to address the deficient pipelines, the installation of water treatment systems, the installation of sewage treatment plants. For instance, in County Kerry we have applied for approval for over 30 million for leaking water pipes in the county. There's also over 40 villages villages where preliminary plants have been approved for small village sewerage schemes, and for treatment plants, also for extensions to existing sewerage schemes in many of our towns and villages. Regarding group water schemes, there is an urgent need for the Department of Environment to introduce a policy to sort out the uncertainty regarding the implementation of these schemes in the future. As for instance in County Kerry, many of the old group water schemes which were administered at local level with supplies provided by Kerry County Council providing the sources of water from the public sources, many of these are disbanded as the local committees have broken up, and these are now called orphan schemes as they have not been taken in charge by the council, and these group schemes have been left in limbo since the formation of Irish Water. As for the charges for group water schemes, the original proposal by Irish Water was to bill the whole group that joined the group water scheme through the use of a bulk meter, and the group organisers ascertained the amount of payment for each household. But this was a ridiculous scheme, and it was unworkable, and putting the onus back on many of these people who are really giving their voluntary service. And there is an urgent need for clarity following yesterday's amendments regarding the registration by members of group water schemes, and if they sign up, will they then become customers of Irish Water, for instance, and then be liable for charges even that the scheme is not taken over by the council? And if paying for water, are they also responsible for the maintenance of the scheme? The Department of Environment should address these grey areas at an early date and as soon as possible. Thanks very much, Councillor.
Thank you very much. And now call on Deputy Matthew
McGrath. I'm delighted to be able to speak here this evening also on this issue, and to see Minister Kelly yesterday. You'd imagine he was Santa Claus for 1 5 weeks away from Christmas, giving money here and money there, and totally undermining the whole system that was supposed to run Irish Water. The cap charge will be 160 for a single adult households and 260 for a household until the 1st of January 2019. And then what? Who knows if Minister Kelly or I or anybody else will be here, and it's not written anywhere in stone. There'll also be the cap charges are supposed to continue. Will they continue? The guarantee is not written anywhere, so we want clarification on that, and the people do. All eligible households will receive a water conservation grant of £100 a year, when we all know the issue of conservation is the last thing on Ishgain's mind, or indeed the government. It's all about a revenue stream, to collect money for the revenue. I'm surprised that the revenue didn't get their hands on collection of the money. I mean, they may yet. This means that the net cost to single adult household will be €60. For other households, it will be more than 160, and takes no account of the ability to pay argument. None whatsoever. It means that someone on a large income will pay exactly the same as a person on a minimum wage or on unemployment benefit. How is that fair? But I suppose if your social compass is probably, you think it's fair from that side of the house over there. In cases where water is unfit for human consumption, and I have them in Skeena Rink in my own area for 20 years, and Minister Hayes announced a water scheme there, contract was signed, he announced it 12 months ago. Yet there's no pin put to paper anywhere. And Minister Hayes is not here to answer those questions. He's in far-off lands at this present time. Also, there's oh, is he back? That's good. He'll make a big difference. He'll get the sewer scheme started in the morning, I expect. In Clonmel, then, we have, and other towns, we have issues of sewage problems for years, where the corporation staff, and I want to salute them, and the council workers, went out and freed blockages where there were giant sewers or sewers going through people's private property. Now Irish Water won't allow them inside the gate. And there's huge problems, a huge trauma with public sewers running through people's gardens, and you know all what happens there, and they won't allow them in to free it. I mean, they think the households are complete idiots, so I think that's unbelievable. Come to the legacy then. John F. Kennedy, or AFK, Alan Kelly, Minister Kelly. Now, used to be chest out. I'm going, my legacy is sorted this out. I didn't put this in. Minister Hogan, or Big Phil I used to call him, I wish him well now in his new job. He brought it in. Alan was trying to blame him, but he can't shift all the blame. Like we said today, it's a giant process. This baby was born and created by both Fine Gael and Labour, and delivered now by Minister Kelly. And Irish Water are here today in this building, the third week successfully, without informing any of the TDs. They're here to brief the Oireachtas members, but I wasn't told about it, or neither was any of my colleagues. I was not. I wasn't told about it last week either, and I do read my emails.
Please,
could I have the floor, please?
Shortage of time here.
Water conservation. I have in my hand. It's not a hand grenade. It's a Tetran water meter, and that's what's been put in. No, but it's very important as regards conservation. In Runahone, Charles Kickham country, if you've never travelled at all, if you've never run a home, you didn't travel. 500 of these meters were fitted last year by GMC Sierra company, same company fitting the water meters now. They're down there now in spite of my two Dáil questions in the last 2 weeks, trying to stop them, taking out those meters and putting in new ones. No, it's only a docile incident. It's meant to be. He's minded to be an open man because he knows what it is to do.
In the chamber, you know.
I'm just making the point, Controller, that they won't listen. I've asked two PQs. I've been told total untruths. Total misled information that there was no meters in the boxes, first of all, when there's 600. I haven't counted. And Irish Water are visiting there next Monday with me, so we'll see what happens. This is a shambles from start to finish. And it's nothing but conserving water. And it's been an unholy mess that's now been visited on the people. Irish Water should never have been set up. The time we were voting on it, here we were discussing it with no debate. 3 hours was allowed for it. I said in my short comment that the only thing I liked about it was the name, Ishgain. I liked a bit of Gaeilge now and then. But other than that, it's a monster that's out of control. It's like a wild animal in the woods and nobody knows where it'll end up. And I feel sorry for some good people that have gone into work there. I know some of them that had a lot of expertise. But the whole situation has been so badly handled. Like the situation of they coming in here this evening to meet us, and again last week, and I hear on the news headlines that they were here. I have never met them. I'm meeting them on Monday in Mudnahone. I will see some red faces explaining why they were destruct 600 metres. And when I asked the question how much per metre was it costing, I was told it was commercially sensitive. But in fact, they gave me the figure for national figure was 594 million plus VAT. And the ordinary people, to the pin of the collar trying to live, put food on the table. I salute the people in the group schemes and the pioneers that developed those schemes. I'm glad that the people that have well grants, their own wells, are getting the £100 grant as well, because they need to be supported. Why should they pay for everything? And I salute the people, as I said, and the council staff over the years who developed the schemes. You would think with no water schemes, there's a desert, with no reservoir, no pipes that the Irish Water got, with damn good services supplied by a lot of good people over the years, and we didn't hand it over to this quango to wreck it, abuse it and hijack it.
Thank you. Deputy Peter Matches, 5 minutes.
Yeah, look, for the last numbers of weeks, the storm clouds have been gathering, and the public, the people of Ireland, have shown in peaceful protest that this cumulative weight, burden, exhaustion that's come over them, that our society has become divided, has come about on an unfair basis. What happened last Saturday was completely wrong, appalling stuff. Unreservedly, to imprison somebody in their car in that sort of terrifying situation is all wrong. But let me remind you, Minister, that there's 100,000 families terrified in mortgage imprisonment as a result of what was meted out to this country unfairly following the financial collapse in 2008. And that's wrong. Suicides have taken place. Sicknesses have visited those families, and families have fallen apart. And that's as a result of the intolerable burden of distress. And the water situation is the arrival of another consequence. The cumulative consequence of all of this is wrong. As we speak now, down in Patrick Honohan's desk, there's 25 billion of promissory bonds that came about as a result of a whip vote under virtually no discussion in February 2013. National debt was created out of bank losses. That's wrong. We should dare to imagine the correct resolution of that situation. We should bring 26 members of this Dáil down to his office, one from each county, and take the bonds out of his drawer and tear them up and say to Mr. Draghi, that is something that is not deliverable to the Irish people. And you know what? The cost of repair, reconditioning and reinstating the water system is put at about 10 billion. 10 billion from 25 billion leaves 15 billion. 15 billion for further capital infrastructure and for supporting and underpinning the social protection of people who have been marginalised, the 700 children who have no homes tonight, the 40 people who sleep on Grafton Street tonight without homes, the 90,000 people on housing lists waiting for housing accommodation, the teachers, the nurses who are doing double jobs in order to pay the bills. And we're setting up infrastructures for local property tax and for water charges, big infrastructures that are costly. Do you know, we live in a country that is perhaps the best served country in the world for steady rainfall throughout the year. If the infrastructure for reservoirs, treatment plants and pipes was brought up to date, costing 10 billion, which 10 billion can be got from the 25 billion torn up down in Patrick Honahan's drawer? If that came about, we don't need meters, we don't need conservation. We've the rain falling steadily throughout the 12 months. This year was exceptionally good, but it was still enough for the water requirements of industry, of agriculture and households if there wasn't the clapped out infrastructure that was allowed to rot in the ground for the last number of 25, 30 years. But the reality is that there's an unfairness in this country, and the progressive nature of these new charges requiring big bureaucracies to bill and measure is all wrong. We should think with imagination. We should think that the only sources of paying the state expenditures for the services of hospitals and so on, and teachers and everything, the Gardaí, that comes from only three sources: personal incomes, corporate incomes, and expenditure taxation, VAT, and customs and excise duties. That's all. So if you give a tax a new name by saying it's property tax or water charge, it's not. It's out of personal incomes. And the government has been gutless and afraid to put a bill in front of the corporates whose incomes since 2008 have actually, in nearly all cases, remained steady or risen. You've been afraid to say, help us in the national recovery effort. Here's a bill, 2.5% of your own reported declared profits. That would bring in 2.2 billion a year. That would have been 6.6 billion over the last 3 years. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Honestly, we're all on the same side. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on Deputy Andrew Doyle, sharing time with Jerry Buttimer and Deputy Paul Keogh, or Minister Paul Keogh. Sorry.
Thank you, Count Corla. Well, I'll try and steer away from theatrics and lectures. Just to say that at the beginning of 2014, it was predicted that we would have to take 2 billion further out of the economy. Sometime around the middle of the year, the debate was whether or not we'd actually take somewhere between 1 and 2 billion. What in actual fact happened in the October budget was that 1 billion was put back into the economy. Now, it would have been very simple to have reduced that and continued to charge more tax on work instead of reducing tax on employment and endeavour. And put simply, that meant that everything that we have tried to do, we would have done the same as always with our water service, which is put an elastoplast on a problem that needs serious investment. And just to draw the comparison, if 30 years ago, DSB, which I wouldn't call a quango, but some people seem to consider any commercial semi-state company to be a quango. If the ESB had stayed in state ownership fully and have to invest out of capital expenditure every year, I just wonder, would we have the Hewlett-Packards or the Intels or any other major corporations here who actually provide a lot of employment? And one of the other things they do need is water. And I'm not prepared to actually walk down to Mr. Honahan and tear up bonds on the basis that I'll be able to borrow money to run the national exchequer money, and when we're still running in deficit and we're not able to service the money without borrowing money every year. So if people want to take that risk, fine. But it's a bluff I'm not prepared to take. Now, there's been a few concerns that have been articulated through public protest and the public getting on to us. But just before I go to that, just to put this in context, there's 2.2 million households in this country. There's about 600,000, or over 25% of them, that have not been and will not be customers of Irish Water. And they will continue to do what they have done down the years, which is provide for their own water. If there's no water in the tap, they have to go out and fix it and pay for it whatever way they can. And the same with regard to wastewater. And under water framework directives and the like, and through new rules from the Department of the Environment, a private septic tank is meant to be emptied, I'm not sure if it's every 18 months or 2 years. The average cost for getting that done is €350. And people have been paying for that all along. So you would think that those people didn't exist in this country, to listen to some of the rhetoric that has gone on over the last couple of weeks. So it's just to put it in context. Certainty about the charge, bonuses, and two red herrings, privatisation and PPSN numbers. I had to replace my driver's licence. I hope I'm allowed to show that, Ciarán Corley, here. I had to give my PPSN number to the NDLS, the National Driving Licence Service, which is, not quite sure what you'd call it, but it's an agency. I had to give my PPSN number. I wanted my licence. I gave it. Well, it hasn't been sold on yet, Deputy. But in fairness, and I'm one of the ones that would rather have been given my PPSN number to the post office, quite willingly, being perfectly honest with you, and hope that at the next stage that the RSA will take that on board. So people give their PPSN numbers, but anyway, it's been dealt with. Privatisation, red herring. The government wanted to sell a commercial semi-state or a utility company. We had every reason to sell the ESB networks here when it was put on the menu of options to sell. Probably the one which was the golden, the most lucrative of all, and we decided no, it's too critically important. We learned from the mistakes of the past, from what happened with Eircom networks. So anyway, the government is now accused, instead of being arrogant, of listening. That's all they're accused of. They've addressed probably the four biggest concerns that were put before the people. I'd like to just concentrate on one particular issue, and that's conservation. And I think if Irish Water can, over the next 4 years that it has an opportunity, prove that it can save money by conservation, the meter should be a way of identifying the leaks. It's been proven in group schemes, it's been proven in places where it's already been installed. If we could say, through rainwater harvest, through repairing the leaks, that we no longer need to put in a piped infrastructure to bring the water from the Shannon all the way through to Dublin City to augment the supply, and at a huge capital cost and an environmental impact, then I think it would be proved to be worthwhile. Just give a name check to one company, RainSafe. Look at them. They can do a non-chemical, non-chlorine treatment water conservation where any water off a roof, if it's stored, can be potable at a cost. And I think the €100 conservation and the principle of a conservation grant should be used for that purpose. Thank you, Ciarán Corley.
Deputy Jerry Butler.
Good morning, Ciarán Corley, and I want to welcome the opportunity to speak in this debate, Ciarán Corley. It's extraordinary that yesterday the opposition were claiming government wasn't listening, yet tonight we're bereft of Fianna Fáil, of a whole plethora of independents and of the technical group, which just underlines the fact that they are playing to the gallery. The creation... That's correct, Deputy Brune, we're here, you're correct. And I must say, I would respect Deputy Brune immensely. I might agree with him in lots of things, I would disagree with him, but as a government, we have listened and we've realised we made a mistake, Ciarán Corley. And the essence of a parliamentary democracy is that we listen to the people. And Deputy Matthews speaks about imagination. The imagination of government has been to come with a solution, to create a utility company which ticks the boxes regarding affordability, regarding certainty, and regarding the quality of supply, along with conservation. And I live in the city of Cork, Ciarán Corley, where in 2009 our city was flooded. Irish Water is, with a capital investment programme, going to create and spend 185 million in the city of Cork. That is money being put into water infrastructure for the citizens of the city of Cork and the people of Cork. And I very much welcome the fact that the Cork City Water Supply Scheme, the Wilton Lee Road Trunk Main Scheme, the Lee Road Water Treatment Plant Upgrade, the Cork Lower Harbour Main Drainage Scheme, the Crosshaven Sewage Scheme Storm Outfall Network, and the Shannon Vale Sewage Scheme Network Upgrade will all take place. Benefits that are tangible to the people of Cork. People criticise that change doesn't happen or that change comes so slowly. And when a government tries to do things differently, the reaction from the opposition remains the same. Resist change with no proposal that's alternatively credible. What does Sinn Féin want? No one quite knows. I was here, I was listening. What do Fianna Fáil want?
We're short on time here, please.
Will the OD wants to keep the Irish Water.
Chair, please. Thank you.
Deputy Cowan wants to bring in the NRA, who have no expertise in water at all, in the management of water. And Deputy Matthews' proposal is in fantasy voodoo economic land. And what have government done? We've created certainty for 4 years. We are encouraging people. We're encouraging people for the cost of €1.15 or €3 per week to become part of Irish Water, a utility company. And whether we like it or not, Ceann Comhairle, it costs money to do what Deputy Matthews spoke about in his address regarding the managing of water to have pristine quality to drink, and as Deputy McEntee said regarding Intel as an example, in terms of the water they need for their company to create jobs. And despite the economic voodoo land that some people live in, we do need to be real about where we can get the money from. And that's the facts, whether you like it or not. And yes, government have made mistakes. And yes, it's taken us far too long, Ceann Comhairle, to get to the point where we've rectified that. But thankfully, we have listened, and we've taken on board the concerns expressed by many of us over a period of time. And that's the hallmark of a government that is about governing, is about its ability to listen and to put in place a plan, an alternative to what was there before. There are some, Ceann Comhairle, who do not want to see new jobs being created, who do not want to see our people prosper. Hear, hear. But those of us in politics who want to make a difference recognise that being in government involves making decisions that will have a lasting impression on the future economic landscape of our country. And that's why this government can go to the people in 2016 on its record of Well, you know, Deputy Brune, I'll conclude in this. I'd rather stand for something than be a populist and go out there and oppose for the sake of opposition. And I'm not saying you are now. I would much rather do that.
If you speak to the
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. I would much rather do that, Ceann Comhairle. And I'll conclude in this. Because the job of government, the job of government and the job that this government got was to fix our country's economic fortune. Together with the Irish people, since we came into government in 2011, we have done that. The people have played a huge role, but government have had a plan. And today, Ceann Comhairle, and I'll finish in this, with this new proposal for Irish Water, will be the continuation of that journey.
Minister Keogh.
Thank you very much, Ceann Comhairle. Ceann Comhairle, in 25 years from now, the establishment of Irish Water and the upgrading of our water infrastructure will be seen as a national achievement. It will be compared to the establishment of the ESB and the rollout of our national electricity programme after independence. Young Irish men and women will not believe that in the early years of the 21st century, our water infrastructure was, in a country this size, run by over 30 different bodies with little coordination. 22,180 people were on boiled water notices, 42 urban area sewage was discharged untreated, putting rivers and bathing waters at risk of pollution. A national leakage rate of treated water was up to 49%. Much of our water infrastructure was laid when we were part of the United Kingdom. 800 metres of our water piping in Dublin alone has not been upgraded since we were under British rule. Insufficient drinking water supply existed for the Greater Dublin area. Most European capital cities have between 15 and 20% spare capacity, whereas Dublin operates at approximately 96 to 99% of full capacity. Future generations of Irish people will wonder how their parents and grandparents lived in a time before Irish Water. They will think that the history books exaggerate when it says that half the water was treated and the other half leaked. Some of the remainder was unfit for use, and had to be boiled, and an untreated sewage was allowed to flow into our natural environment. The long-term benefits of the establishment of Irish Water, including the potential capital investment in infrastructure, far outweigh the difficulties that currently exist. As a government, we accept that we've made mistakes, and this has been acknowledged by both the Taoiseach, the Taoiseach and the Minister for the Environment yesterday. The starting date for domestic water charging will now be the 1st of January 2015, with the first bills to issue in April 2015. This means that the water charges won't start until after the benefits of Budget 2015 have been felt by households right across the country. All eligible households will receive a water conservation grant of €100 per year, allowing all households to invest in water conservation measures to reduce their water use. The net cost for water will be €60 for a single adult household, or €160 for all other households. Households with either a water supply only or sewage only service will pay 50% of these rates. The use of water meters can result in even lower charges than the cap charge. Estimates show that if metered households can reduce their water consumption by between 10 and 15%, then half of the Irish households will be able to cut their bills even below the cap charge. A number of constituents have raised the issue of having to provide their PPS number, and had a major objection in the way Irish Water was set to operate. It is a positive step that the PPS numbers will not be required for the registration of Irish Water. This is a clear indication that despite what opposition TDs may claim, this government has listened and acted upon the concerns of the Irish people. The new arrangements can be seen as prioritising affordability, certainty, clarity, simplicity and encourage conservation. Affordability: the absolutely maximum charge is €3 per week for a large household once the conservation grant is taken into account. For a single household, it will be just over €1 per week. Households will also have the opportunity to manage their water consumption to achieve lower metered bill. Certainty: all households will know that their maximum bills will last up until early 2019. The next couple of years will see major improvements in our water infrastructure. We will see less foul water notices, less untreated sewage plants released into our environment, and less expensive treater water leak from out-of-dated pipes. Future generations of Irish men and women will look at the violence directed against the Taoiseach, the Taoiseach, the Gardaí and Irish Water staff, and wonder why the people would stand in their way of improving our water services and quality. The truth is that many of these violent protesters are not as interested in the issue of water as they might show to be, but they are more interested in abusing people, including members of An Garda Síochána. Thank you. Concordia, this is a watershed moment, I believe, for Irish Water and for the future generations of Ireland, and I commend the motion to the House.
Thank you very much. Deputy Brune. 5 minutes, thank you.
And thanks for your kindness in giving me a few minutes. About a year ago, of course, about a year ago, I was one of the deputies who voted against the establishment of Irish Water. I foresaw and thought it would be a complete disaster and turn out to be a very toxic brand, as it was described last night. And of course, that's precisely what has happened. I also believe that water taxes or charges, they're a step too far for constituents who've suffered so badly from health, education, social welfare benefits and other cuts since 2008, and indeed from the onerous and bullying imposition of the household property tax. And oftentimes on weekends at information clinics, and I'm sure other deputies have the same experience, people show you their payslip, their weekly payslip or their fortnightly payslip. It shows big amounts of PAYE, PRSI, USC, their pension contribution, the property tax they're paying by the week, Minister, or by the fortnight, and now it'll be showing your new water tax. A few months ago, Ceann Comhairle, I put it to Taoiseach Kenny that this vital question, which is exercising our people so much, it should be put to them in a general election, that we should have an immediate general election on this matter. Let the people decide. I believe their views haven't been listened to, and I reiterate that this evening. In the 1980s and later in the 1990s, as you'll remember, Ceann, as the political leader and the leader of the Labour Party in Dublin City Council, I fiercely opposed water taxes. In that era, my neighbours in the Coolock Artane and the Raheny Kilbarrack wards, which I represented in Turkey, return. They were suffering deeply from the vicious and cruel cuts of the Haughey and Reynolds, Fianna Fáil and PD governments. And then as now, of course, we've massive emigration, massive suffering of our people. I believe we did have the wealth and resources in this country to significantly upgrade our national infrastructure in education, health, transport and indeed water and drainage services. And I believe we still have it, in fact, today. I notice, in fact, in that particular era, as chairperson of General Purposes Committee all through the 1990s, despite the ferocious contempt of the Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil parties for this city and for this area, despite all of that, we managed to significantly upgrade the water services of the 4 counties in Dublin and indeed of the surrounding counties. And that's the reason why when Minister Phil Hogan made his disastrous decision to pursue Irish Water, we were producing in 2012, we were producing 1.6 billion litres of water daily to a very high standard, 99% pure, not the kind of stuff that Deputy Allen told us, Minister Alan Kelly told us last night, or that the mantra that the Taoiseach constantly gives us. I believe Irish Water was always a very bad idea, very badly thought out, very badly executed. Of course, and we heard something about his parents this morning, if it was a film or theatre production, of course, it's a Fianna Fáil production. Fianna Fáil who isn't here. The Fianna Fáil production, Fine Gael direction, and there's going to be a Labour Fall Guy. Labour Fall Guys, a Labour tragedy for that party, just as it was before. They'll be written out of the script like the Greens. That's the reality of the foundation of Irish Water. Now, yesterday, Minister Kelly, you had an opportunity to remove the toxicity of Irish Water and its taxes on the backs of the Irish people, the ordinary people, and indeed from your unfortunate colleagues in the parliamentary parties. Could simply come into this House, apologise at length for the madcap, error-strewn history of Irish Water and the great distress it's caused our hard-pressed citizens, and then simply have announced its abolition and also the abolition of the hateful water taxes. Sadly, Minister, you refused to take that opportunity yesterday, and you persisted with this morass, which is Irish Water. Irish Water was a bad idea because it was created as part of Bord Gáis Éireann, one of the least efficient, costly and most remote semi-states, and I think most deputies have had that experience, in fact, with Bord Gáis Éireann. It was also a bad idea because it includes vast local drainage networks along with local water systems in a new, huge and unwieldy quango. And when you think about it, I mean, why would you have, if you like, every single street in every single area of urban Ireland, every single townland, every single pipeline under one organisation? Like, it's not like electricity, Minister. It's not like gas. It's a much more complex, double, in fact, system. And this government, in fact. So I think has to be said, more importantly, the financial numbers for Irish Water, they simply don't add up, Minister. And it was disappointing yesterday. You didn't give us those numbers in this House. We had to go back to open up our laptops and our phones and find, in fact, on a Twitter account what the numbers were. And the numbers don't add up. The vast bulk of the funding from Irish Water will still come from the Exchequer, as indeed it should come and as it is appropriate to come. So I want to say in conclusion, and thanks very much, Can, for your leniency, there is only one settlement for this problem, one solution for Irish Water. Stop spending money, Minister, on useless, unnecessary and expensive meters. Abolish the company and its egregious taxes. Get rid of them. Return the water services function to our much less expensive and, for all their faults, much more efficient local authorities, perhaps operating on a regional basis. After the general election, this will be the solution. You might as well do it now, Minister, before your own party is devastated. Thanks, Cam.
Minister Coffey.
Thank you, Count Corla.
I think you have about 12 minutes.
Yeah. Let me start by thanking the many deputies on all sides of the House for their contributions in this debate. Indeed, the discussion has been far-ranging and wide. I will not be able to address every single issue, but I will try in the time available to address the main issues involved. I'd first like to turn to the question of capital investment in our water services. Many deputies have referred to the fact that billions have been invested in water services infrastructure in the past, and yes, this is the case. But we all know that this investment has been funded from taxation. The question is, have we invested enough? And if not, how are we going to fund the infrastructure deficit arising and to meet the challenges to fix the water system that exists at the moment? Where, essentially, will the money come from? The answer to the first question is patently obvious. We have simply not invested anything near what is required to deliver a modern, efficient and reliable water and sewerage system across this country. If we had, we would not have the water boil notices that we see all over the country. We would not have water supply and capacity problems, especially here in Dublin City. We would not have unacceptably high levels of leakage in the system, and we would certainly not have the raw sewage that enters our rivers and seas all around this country. The fundamental issue here is that we need additional funding for water services. And in answering the question as to how we are going to secure that level of investment, it is simply not credible to say that we would deliver that through general taxation, when we know clearly that we haven't managed this in the past. We haven't managed it for decades. We will be failing in our duty as public representatives, and we will be failing future generations if we take the easy option and the easy way out, and continue to apply approaches that have not delivered in the past. Customer charges set at a modest level with certainty into the future provide a mechanism through which the investment we need can be secured. The revenue from customer charges will allow Irish Water to borrow and to fund an expanded capital programme. They can plan strategically for over a 25-year horizon, which allows for better use of this capital programme to develop much-needed projects all over the country. And can I say, this is not a new model for Ireland. ESB networks and their network renewal programme have already shown how a national utility in this country manages its assets and upgrade them. The money for this renewal programme was borrowed off balance sheet on the capital markets in the very same way and the very same principle that will apply to Irish Water. This is why we need the charges, and this is why we need a national utility. The set-up investment in asset management systems is essential for capital investment planning and will have considerable benefits in project costs and the timeliness of delivery. Let me give you some examples of projects where we already know that Irish Water's approach to capital investment will make real savings compared to previous local authority plans. The Ringsend Sewage Treatment Plant, a saving of €170 million by adopting Irish Water's approach. The Greater Dublin Area Drainage Scheme, a savings of €30 million. The Cork City Water Supply Scheme, a saving of almost €22 million. Navan Meath Water Supply, a saving of almost €10 million, and the Kerry Central Water Supply, a saving of almost €9 million. All of that savings is achieved by the Irish Water approach in comparison to the local authority approach, which would have been far more costly. These 5 projects alone will yield savings of nearly €250 million, far exceeding the cost of setting up Irish Water and equal to the entire capital spending by the Department of the Environment. Local authorities were not able to plan in this way. They did not have the certainty of funding over the longer term, which a utility can achieve with its capacity to borrow on markets and plan over the longer period. Nationally, project development in the past largely focused on county rather than regional or national solutions, and economies of scale were difficult to achieve. Irish Water, with access to borrowing on capital markets, can ensure that more projects can be advanced and funded over time. This will underpin better regional development and consistency of services across the country. The approach to water charges that the Government has now decided on was framed to ensure that charges are modest, affordable and certain for the future. The CER has already reviewed the operational costs of Irish Water until 2016 and set challenging efficiency targets. All Irish Water's customers, those who pay and those who don't pay, need to be treated fairly. When we talk about those who don't pay, it's important that we draw a distinction between those who may find it difficult to pay and those who simply refuse to pay. For those who may have difficulties in paying, there will be an easy pay options, and Irish Water will engage with people who want to agree payment plans, which are manageable from their perspective. For those who choose not to pay, the Government will be introducing legislation to provide a range of mechanisms through which they can be pursued. The compliant customers who pay their charges would expect nothing less. It is regrettable that some members of the House have indicated that they've chosen not to pay. Sinn Féin's position on all of this is particularly untenable. Yesterday I listened to them talking about having had what they described as a consistent position on water charges. It couldn't be further from the truth. Only in the last few weeks we've had Deputy Adams wondering whether he was first actually liable for charges. Then he moved to the position that he would pay the charges. And now Sinn Féin are saying that they're opposed to the charges and are not going to pay. That is indeed some definition of consistency. But why are we surprised? Given how Sinn Féin manipulates the English language every time they have to face up to a difficult issue. Sinn Féin, when they're in government in the north, in their Northern Ireland budget, the existing budget they're operating under, from 2011 to 2015, they state, and it's clear for all to see, in Northern Ireland, the water services are currently primarily funded from the public expenditure. And it goes on to say, this creates pressure in other areas. For example, health and education funding needs to be diverted to cover the associated water costs. This is the admission that water services in Northern Ireland are competing out of this very same funding as all other government departments in the north, and this has had a distinct lack of funding. I note that Northern Irish Water admit as much on their website, and this is the exact argument that government has been making, that if we want to fund from the general taxation, we have to divert funds from much-needed other areas. And of course, Sinn Féin disagree here, but they have the very opposite economies in place in Northern Ireland. It exposes Sinn Féin for the double-speak that they have. Fianna Fáil are now calling for the abolition of Irish Water, despite the fact that in Fianna Fáil's National Recovery Plan 2010 to 2014, they stated they would charge people €400 per year for water services. Also, what is interesting to note is that Fianna Fáil strongly opposed the establishment of our other national utility, the ESB, in 1927. This is typical of Fianna Fáil's stint in opposition in this country. Punch and Judy politics. No substance, no solution, and trying to be all things to everyone. And then we have the technical group. Members of this group, including TDs, who encourage people not to pay their household charge, indeed held meetings all over the country, collecting €5 to say that they'd get the best legal advice for them. They encourage people not to pay their septic tank charges. And where were they when those charges then applied and the penalties applied? They abandoned those very same people. You're the people that are leading people up the garden path and up the garden hill. Vulnerable people were left high and dry, Deputy Higgins. Vulnerable people have been left high and dry by you people, bringing people to meetings and telling them and making them promises that you know you cannot keep. The Socialist Party and indeed Sinn Féin, you've marched people up the hill on many occasions in the past and then you have abandoned them. I have no doubt that you'll do the very same on this occasion again. Turning now, Ceann Comhairle, to the metering programme. I would like to respond to comments from some deputies suggesting that the new measures being introduced have resulted in water meters being redundant and that conservation is no longer a priority. This is simply not the case. Metering households will have an opportunity to beat the cap and have bills lower than the capped amounts of €160 and €260. Let me be clear, a key underpinning of the reform of the water services sector is to ensure that we manage our precious water resources well. We have a situation at Ceann Comhairle where up to 49% of treated water is being leaked into the ground before it reaches people's taps. The only way to identify these leaks is to meter them. In fact, as a stark example of this, 20 houses were identified in Dublin City alone that were leaking cumulatively over 1 million litres of water under their driveway every day. This combined is enough to service the entire town of Gorey. Just let's think about that. 20 houses leaking. We're leaking enough treated water to service a town of over 9,000 people. In summary, meters, the first fix scheme and the water conservation grant can and will contribute to conserving and saving water. It's also important to Ceann Comhairle that I recap on why we need a single national public utility for water and sewerage. The reason is simple. The previous system of providing water services through local authorities with limited public funding was not capable of delivering the scale of investment that we need. The whole process associated with the investment programme was slow, bureaucratic and inefficient. And inevitably, each local authority prioritised their own needs without, in many cases, looking at the potential for regional solutions delivering economies of scale. Minister Kelly highlighted yesterday at Ceann Comhairle where that has gotten us, and it has no harm to remind the House again. more than 20,000 people on boil water notices, almost half of our water unaccounted for, hundreds of kilometres of pipes in the system over 100 years old, and Dublin's capacity, Deputy Brune, Dublin's water capacity is on a knife edge, and we have seen that in the past. 42 towns all over this country with wholly inadequate sewage systems, with raw sewage going out into the sea and into the water. That is the reality of where we are, Count Corla, and it will remain a reality without a single national publicly owned utility, which is precisely why Irish Water has been established. To conclude, Count Corla, I want to thank again deputies for their contributions that they have made in this very important debate over the last 2 days. The Government is committed to reforming the way in which water services are delivered in this country. We have listened to the concerns of the people, and we are now putting in place a simpler, fairer, more certain and a more affordable system of water charges. Count Corla, I therefore commend the motion to the House.
I now put the question that the motion be agreed to. Is that agreed? The Teachtaí atá a héamh na ceiste Aberdís tá, the Teachtaí atá na cine Aberdís níl. Sílim Gwyn and Kestrich. Vote.